Here's a few reasons why I think the Loch Ness Monster cannot exist. The Loch Ness Monster is said to be big. There are reports of it ranging anywhere from 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 feet long. And the most common description of the Loch Ness Monster is a plesiosaur type animal. Now, plesiosaur was a prehistoric marine reptile that lived in shallow oceans. The loch is fresh water. Yes, it does connect to the ocean via the River Ness, but it's a long way from the ocean. And the River Ness, at certain points, becomes very shallow. Way too shallow for a large animal to swim from the ocean through the River Ness and into that loch. Now, the loch is very deep. It is one of the deepest bodies of fresh water on the planet. So it is a big, deep lake. Now, there certainly could be animals that live in there that haven't been discovered, but something like a plesiosaur? No. The loch is a glacial lake. It's only been there for about 10,000 years. So during the time where plesiosaurs were still alive, swimming in the oceans, that lake didn't actually exist. Now, people might say, well, maybe it got trapped during that sort of transitional period where that lake became isolated and cut off, for the most part, to the ocean. Maybe something prehistoric got trapped in there. Well, maybe. But the thing is, plesiosaurs are air breathers. They're not fish, they are reptiles. They need to breathe air, just like a crocodile or a turtle does. So, if there was a breeding population of prehistoric marine reptiles in that lake, we would be seeing them coming up and taking a breath very often. And I mean very often. For there to be a big enough population for it to exist in that lake for as long as it has, we're talking centuries, there has been sightings, people are gonna get some pretty good photos and videos of a giant reptile head coming up and breathing air. Now, people will say maybe it evolved to breathe underwater, things like that. Well, then it wouldn't be a plesiosaur, it wouldn't be a prehistoric marine reptile. Marine reptiles, or any reptile for that matter, cannot breathe underwater. So what else are we looking at here? Are we looking at a large undescribed species of long-necked pinniped? A pinniped being seals, walrus, sea lions. And that is an actual theory, that it is an evolved species of long-necked pinniped. Now, again, pinnipeds breathe air. We would see it all the time, coming up for air. We would see them on the land, because no pinniped lives primarily in the water. They come onto land to heat up, they come on land to give birth, things like that. Again, we would see them quite often. Now, there is another theory, and this became popular because of some environmental DNA samples that were taken in that loch. It was discovered that there is eel DNA in Loch Ness, and eels weren't really thought to live in that loch. But could that account for sightings of like 40-foot animals? No. There's fish like the conger eel and things like that. They're not true eels, and they do get enormous. But they're not craning their neck out of the water. You know, they're not big enough to be mistaken for a 40-foot plesiosaur-like animal. It's just not possible. No. We would see carcasses of them washing up. Fishermen would be snagging them all the time. So, although there may be animals like eels that live in that lake that weren't really thought to live in there before, it's probably not a good candidate for the Loch Ness Monster. Now, what do I think the Loch Ness Monster is? Well, I have a few theories. About every 2 to 4 years, seals end up in that loch. Okay? And only a few years ago, there were like 4 that made their way into that loch, and they were in there for a few months. And guess what? Loch Ness Monster sightings skyrocketed. Now, because seals can swim in very shallow water, they can waddle over parts of the water that's shallow, like what happens in the River Ness. So they can absolutely make their way into Loch Ness, and they do. There is well documented sightings of them in that loch. I've seen photos of the seals frolicking in that loch, and when there's 3 of them jumping out of the water in a procession, it looks like humps coming out of the water. You would absolutely go, that is the Loch Ness Monster, without a doubt. And that's what I think is happening. I think every so often, seals get into that loch and people think they see the Loch Ness Monster. They're not used to seeing large mammals or any large animal in that lake at all. So of course they're going to think that's the Loch Ness Monster. You see a few humps coming out of the water, that's the Loch Ness Monster. And it's a grey, smooth, mottled colour, exactly like the descriptions of the Loch Ness Monster. So for that reason, I can pretty much say, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, mind you, that the Loch Ness Monster is nothing truly exotic, nothing truly undiscovered. It is probably seals swimming around that loch. There's probably a lot of things that could contribute to the sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. Yes, we got seals. There's boat wake in the water. Certain ripples in the water can look like something moving in that water. So it's probably a whole combination of things combined that contributes to the entire legend and the sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. Now, nobody wants the Loch Ness Monster to be real than I do, but although I love cryptozoology, I'm pretty realistic about a lot of them. And there are a lot of cryptids that I don't think exist, and there are a lot that I think, yes, there is a chance they can exist. And in fact, I went to the jungles of Sumatra to look for a cryptid, and I found some pretty good evidence that it does exist. So I'm not trying to poo-poo on your parade here. I'm just saying this is my opinion, and I think the Loch Ness Monster, guess what? It's just a legend, unfortunately. Or it's coming through some interdimensional porthole thing at the bottom of the loch, coming into our consciousness and out, some sort of thing, black hole, wormhole thing. That's probably what's happening, but, you know, we'll get into that another time. Anyway, sorry to disappoint yous.